Hey everyone, I'm Carson Slovak. I'm here at Atrium Audio where we recorded the new Drumforge Matt Greiner sample library. I wanted to take a few minutes and walk through some of the features of the plugin and show you what it can do. So when we first open the plugin, we get this screen where you can choose all the individual elements of your drum kit. We've made a couple presets here. This particular one is Studio Kit 2. So we recorded two different drum kits for this sample library. We recorded Matt's live DW kit that he uses at shows, and we recorded our DW kit here at Atrium, and that's the studio kit. So we have 2 kicks, 7 snares, 2 sets of toms with an 8-inch tom thrown in there, 1 hi-hat, 1 ride, 5 crashes, 5 chinas, a couple of splashes, a stack, and 2 of Matt's signature blast bells. All these cymbals are made by Zildjian. This screen, you can pretty much just drag and drop whatever part of the kit that you want into place. If you want to try out different snares, you can also go over here and kind of scroll through them without having to drag and drop anything. When you click on any of these images, you get a preview of what that sample sounds like. And same thing over here. At the list view, you can click on any of these images and hear what you're going to get. So we've got a pretty good variety of snare tones here, different tunings, and we've got a lot of really cool sounding snares. We have a 13-inch stone snare. It's actually made of stone, which is pretty neat. We've got a dial tune maple snare, a DW brass, a DW knurled bronze, a Greiner Kilmer honey walnut, and a Greiner Kilmer regular walnut, 14-inch. And we've also got Matt's Truth 14-inch snare. So, moving over to this view, this is kind of like the carousel page where you can scroll through each of these instruments. You can preview it. And for each one, you have this subgroup of faders. So for kick, we have a in mic, we have a sub mic, we have a set of overheads, a set of rooms, and a mono room. Room 1 is a stereo room for all the drums, and room 2 is a mono room. For room 1, we used a pair of Coles 4038s, and the mono room is an AKG 414. Coming down here, you can see it's pretty standard fader layout. You've got your pan, you've got mute, solo, phase, you've got your level, and for the stereo tracks you can swap left and right with that button if you want to. And then you've got your master, which is everything all together. These tabs down at the bottom of the screen are very useful also. You've got a tack sustain release, which you can dial in very specifically for each mic signal, which is pretty handy. You've got this cool velocity interpretation curve, which allows you to bring in MIDI that you had programmed maybe with another library with specific velocity response and tailor it so that it translates properly. And then on this little sample tab over here, you can get really detailed with the individual levels of individual velocity layers. So for instance, if the medium hit is a little too loud, you can actually attenuate that or boost it with this knob here. And then you can preview that over here on the right and choose left foot or right foot. Or for the snare, you've got these other options here for articulations, rim click, snare drag, right hand, left hand, snare side stick. For the toms, you've got right hand and left hand. Moving over to the last tab, the config tab. This is pretty cool because you can actually adjust the pitch of each individual drum. This coarse knob will adjust it by half steps, and the fine knob will adjust it by cents rather, sorry. And then over here you've got this alternate tab, which when enabled and you set the threshold of milliseconds, so depending on what tempo your song is at, if you have a double kick part and you want to alternate between left foot and right foot samples, just enable that and it'll do it automatically as long as it's within this threshold that you can set here. So that pretty much does it for this page of the sampler. Again, you can really just kind of scroll through and get an overview of your whole kit configuration. And when you're on one of these, you can also scroll through this down here and change that just within this view. And then moving over to the mixer. This is one of my favorite parts of this plugin because the mixer in this sampler is super comprehensive, and you can basically do all of your processing within the sampler without the need for any other plugins. And so in this preset Studio Kit 2, I've got, for instance, on the kick channel, which is the first one here, I've got some saturation going, some compression, some EQ, and a little bit of clipping. And then for the snare, EQ, a little bit of clipping, some EQ on the 3 toms. For each channel, you've got all of your processing up here that you can actually drag around and swap the order of too, which is pretty cool. You have these different views that you can display up here at a drop down for all your controls. Or you can go down here and hit these tabs at the bottom and it'll change the view for all of the tracks at once. So here's the saturation view, and for each one you can toggle it in or out. You can choose the saturation type, tube, tape, or distort if you really want to kind of mess up the signal. And then you've got a gain and an output. It's pretty simple. And then for compression, pretty standard. You've got your in button, you've got a high pass filter, your ratio knob, release, threshold, and either fast or slow attack. And for EQ, it's kind of that SSL style EQ layout. Low, low mid, high. And you've got a couple options here with what shape you want these. And then over here we've got some clipping. I'm doing a little bit of clipping here in this preset on the kick and the snare, just a tiny bit. And then you've also got this cool reverb page where you can select a different style of reverb at this drop down, pre-delay, and your wet dry mix. And then the last tab is these sends. You've got 4 sends, so you can get pretty in depth with some complicated routing if you want to, and do all kinds of cool stuff with the bus tracks in these sends. So typically I like to have it in the overview view so I can just kind of see what's going on. The other cool thing about this sampler is that we have dry versions of all of these presets. So we made 6 presets, 3 on the live kit and 3 on the studio kit, which are essentially just different configurations of shells and snares and cymbals. And then for each one of those we have a dry version, which is essentially the same thing, just with all of this processing bypassed. So if you want to print individual tracks out into your DAW and treat them like you would normal acoustically tracked drums, you can do that, and you can have that flexibility to have more of the raw signal and process it in your own way. Or if you want to use our presets as starting points, that's also great. So enough talking. Let me play this back a little bit and you can hear what it sounds like out of the gate on this preset. Cool. And that is a drum part from a new August Burns Red song that they just released called Ancestry. Here's the rest of the track in context. I've just got some stems here that I can unmute. So pretty cool. We tried to tailor this so that right out of the gate you could get a pretty finished sounding drum sound that would fit nicely into a mix, but also give you the leverage to bypass all this processing and do your own thing with it too. The other cool thing about this plugin is that we actually have a custom design compressor built right into all of the bus tracks. So for this setup, the way everything is routed is individual shell channels are routed to the shell bus, and the individual cymbal channels are routed to the cymbal bus, And then over here, here's my shell bus and my cymbal bus. My shells, I'm doing a little bit of clipping, and on the cymbals I've got like a little bit of EQ, boosting some highs, and then a tiny bit of clipping as well. And then both of those buses are going out to the drum bus, which is this one. And I have this compression enabled on the drum bus, and that's essentially a one knob approach. It's based on the Drumflex plugin that Drumforge makes. And it's basically on or off, and you've got a wet dry knob here. I've got it at 70% on all of these presets that we included in the plugin. And what that does is basically just gives you some good old smashy parallel compression on your drum bus if you want it. Or you can activate it just on the shells, whatever your style is. But here's what that sounds like on and off. So as you can see, you can get pretty smashy with this compressor if you want to. I kind of like it around the 70% range. That's kind of the sweet spot to my ears, just straight out of the plugin. But you can do a lot with it, and it's pretty cool. So let's move over to the groove library. We have tons of grooves in here made just for this plugin. They're all categorized. You can choose, you know, if you want to display verses or choruses, breakdowns, fills, whatever you want. And the cool thing about this is you can either sync it to whatever your DAW is tempo is set at, or you can set your own tempo here, and that's currently set at 125. So let's check this out. Here's one of the verses. Here's another one. So that's cool. So if you find something that you like, you can just drag it into this queue over here, and it'll put it there for you. And then say you want to have a fill coming out of that. That's a cool one. Drag that over here. Cool thing about this is that if you drag a fill after a say 4 or 8 bar groove, it'll put the fill at the end of the groove where it's supposed to go, so you don't have an entire 8 bars of a part and then a fill and then another part. So it'll kind of do that for you, which is cool. So let's throw a chorus in here. Let's see. Cool. That's pretty neat. So now you have this kind of little sequential order of these parts, and you can use this to drag it into the session, and it'll create this MIDI region that you can just play back. So that's pretty cool, and as you can see, it put the fill where it was supposed to go. It didn't put it in addition to the full part. And then you can just open this up and drag notes around, make it your own, use it as a tool to inspire some creativity. And that's about it for the groove library section of the sampler. And so moving over here, we have our mapping. The mapping is super straightforward. You can drag different instruments around to different notes if you want to. You can preview it by hitting these buttons. You can also save and load your own maps, or load up one of these presets for popular drum samplers like SSD5 or Superior Drummer. And moving back over to the mix window, the last thing I wanted to talk about was this cool feature that Drumforge incorporated where you can load one-shot samples to be mixed in with any of your tracks. So here I've got my buddy Billy Decker's Drumshotz pack, and say I wanted to mix in one of his one-shot kicks with my kick. You can just select it, and then You've got a couple controls over here, attack, sustain. You can change the pitch. You've got a gate. You can drag this dynamics around to adjust it to taste, and then you've got a level, a pan, and a phase. And here's with that. So that's a pretty cool feature if you want to mix in some one-shots. A lot of people love to do that. And then if you have that, it'll come up on this track here, and you have those same controls displayed and a fader for it. And the last thing I wanted to go over is the way that you can route the outputs of this plugin if you want to print audio to tracks and mix it like you would a traditional kit in your DAW. So on each track you've got your outputs up here, and you can set either the entire track, which is the blend of all the mics, direct, overhead, room mics, to a particular output and record onto a track in your DAW. Or if you want to get more detailed, you can hit this arrow icon, and that brings up the submixer. And each of these individual mic sources have their own output channels. So for instance, if you wanted to create a traditional stereo room track with all of the cymbals and shells baked in, you would just make all of your overhead outputs the same and then route those to a track in your DAW to record the audio onto. And that about covers it. So thanks for watching the video, and for more information and to try the plugin out, go to drumforge.com.